Today, we're going to talk about a slightly worrying trend that I'm noticing with content creators in the sports card space about how Fanatics can 10 times the hobby. And there's some things that are sort of happening that look like it's ignoring the collectors that are already here in order to make room for the collectors coming tomorrow. And like I said, that trend concerns me quite a bit. And this sort of kicked off in my mind about doing another discussion on this topic following this news here from Fanatics, where they basically aligned to a bunch of content creators called Dude Perfect. Now, I didn't know who these people were, but they've got 60 million subscribers on YouTube. And as Mario Alejandro talks to in this tweet, he basically says the comments on this sponsored ad are absolutely brutal. Dude Perfect is a huge brand with close to 60 million YouTube subscribers. They get a crap ton of views. These guys are massive. And he basically goes on to say, but that said, it's a turnoff to many collectors. I'd rather see Fanatics live breaking with retired and current MLB players that collect. That would be breaking news. Imagine a Fanatics event watching Pat Neshek or Corbin Carroll breaking Topps products, right? And, just quickly, it doesn't need to be either or. I'm more than happy for things to happen both, right? There's no reason why you can't have Dude Perfect there and break with athletes. But what Mario was talking to here was on Eric Whiteback's post. There is a crap ton of comments of people basically saying, what the heck is going on here? This is not my hobby. Why are you bringing these guys in? Are you trying to, focus in on breaking? It doesn't seem right to me. Basically, collectors pushing back saying, we don't like this sort of stuff. What are you doing? And like I said, this stuff is good to sort of happen because you want to disrupt, you want to innovate. And like you've basically got noted here, they've got 60 million YouTube subscribers and they've got a big following when it comes to, a younger audience, right? So people are basically saying, well, they want to try and tap into that. That's why Fanatics Live has done this partnership. But where, my concern sort of comes is you've got this pushback from collectors saying, this is weird. What are you doing for us? Why are you focusing in on the new group? And then you get people like Jeff Wilson basically come in and say, well, Mario often has good reads, but he's off base on this one. He says, while Dude Perfect may not appeal to some current collectors, they are one of the biggest content creator brands in the world. They have a massive following, especially with kids. If Fanatics wanted 10 times the hobby and introduce more kids to collecting, this would be wildly more effective than breaking with retired MLB players. Now, like I said, it doesn't have to be either or. You should be doing both Fanatics, but it's that messaging here around, well, if Fanatics wanted 10 times the hobby, this is sort of what they need to do. And when you look at sort of how things have transpired over the last 12 months with the number of content creators that are aligned to Topps and Fanatics and, the messaging they're putting out there and the things they're not talking about, so much so like Eric Whiteback over here, who basically copped a lot of heat because he didn't talk about those backdoored cards and some other issues that Topps and Fanatics have had over the last few months. This guy is very clearly paid for by Topps and Fanatics. He doesn't shy away from that, but he's got a big following on Twitter, and because he has a partnership, that alignment, he doesn't talk about certain things, which then misconstrues, some of the messaging we're getting as viewers, if that's the word. Maybe I mumbled that, but you guys get what I'm trying to say. Like, they're basically not giving us the true opinion, which means things are getting a bit opaque when it comes to communicating stuff to us. It sort of lacks that transparency. And when you've got more and more people signing up to Topps and Fanatics to be these partners, it's like, well, where's the transparency coming from? And, it goes hand in hand with that thing that I just mentioned from Jeff, where you've got people, and I think for a lack of a better term, it's sort of like mansplaining, where it's like, you collectors don't know what you want. You guys don't know what you're talking about. You guys have been here. You've helped elevate the hobby to where it is. You've elevated it to the point that's got Fanatics to invest. But you shouldn't really be talking about what Fanatics should be doing down the future. Who cares if you're pushing back on this sort of stuff? Because if they want to 10 times the hobby, this is the sort of stuff that needs to happen. And, whilst it's probably unfair to pick on Jeff specifically with this comment right here, it sort of goes hand in hand with some other comments we've seen from many different content creators over the last 12 months. And I think you guys, even sitting there yourselves, can think back and see all this sort of stuff that's happening, where you've got Fanatics, coming out and saying they're going to bring out Fanatics Live, which I think is a sort of a cool thing because it can streamline, the end-to-end process. But it's the comments down from Michael Rubin afterwards, talking about wanting to focus in on breaking, and he sees breaking as being the biggest, uptick for them as a business, and wanting to sort of grow the hobby that way and sort of advertise mid-game and all that sort of stuff, and put the focus on that. And when that becomes the business focal point, what does that mean for the rest of the collectors? And I feel like, so much focus is going on to the customers that are going to come from the 10 times growing the hobby perspective, and not enough is going on to the guys that made the hobby relevant in the first place. And that is something that worries me, quite a bit. And you can sort of see here a comment from Sports Card News, who is Ryan from Sports Card Radio, because somebody said, I've never heard of Dude Perfect. I haven't either, but they're obviously quite massive. He says, be careful, the hobby positivity crowd will come after you for slander. Mario responded and said, they're coming after me for pointing to the negative comments, didn't even make the comments himself. He's basically saying he just acknowledged them, which is perfectly fine to do, and it's a bit weird that he copped some heat for that. But then in another comment, Sports Card News, Ryan again basically said a bunch of people are hoping that Michael Rubin notices them. Makes me want to puke. And that goes to what I sort of just said. You've either got people that are aligned or are looking to get aligned, and there's nothing wrong with having a sponsorship or anything like that. But so many of these guys that do get them lose the transparency when they do get those. And it's painfully obvious. I'm not going to point fingers at people other than Eric Whiteback, because he's pretty clear and blatant that he does that. And I've already mentioned that within this video that, you know, some people won't talk about certain news items. And I think stuff like that is concerning, especially when, you know, back to this point, that wanting to 10 times the hobby, because it's not just the fact they're not talking about things. It's the fact that when they're talking about positive changes for the hobby, they're saying, well, you guys shouldn't be pushing back because you don't know any better. And I just think that's, you know, absolutely ridiculous in my opinion, because people that are collectors that have been here, that have made the hobby relevant in the first place, are the ones that matter. So it just seems a bit strange to me. And, you know, I can't recall if I already said this, but yes, this is obviously very hypocritical for me, considering a lot of my content is targeted around things that these businesses do wrong and things they could be doing better, in my opinion. So technically, someone like Jeff is doing the same thing as me. But again, this is to the wider sentiment that you sort of see when it comes to improvements to the hobby that, you know, Fanatics and Topps are trying to make, right? And when there are concerns and legitimate concerns from collectors, it gets pushed aside. It's like those backdoored cards I spoke about, you know, 6 months ago that I've mentioned so many times this week. So many people pushed back on that sort of stuff and ignored it and said, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. Topps and Fanatics have things under control. And it sort of takes to the point that we got to on Monday, Tuesday this week, 6 months later from when I talked about that sort of stuff, where it's happened again and again and again. And then more and more people switch onto it and say, well, hang on a minute, maybe this stuff is up to no good. It just seems pretty weird to me. And then I also saw, you know, another comment from Jeff that I can't sort of see right now. And one of the things that he said was about those backdoored cards. And this goes to the same talking point, right? Where he had a tweet, and I'll find it and put it on screen, but he basically said, well, how do we know that that person, that DFW card shark, actually owned those cards? Maybe he just stole the photos from somewhere online. And it's that sort of sense of pushing back to the people questioning things that goes hand in hand. I've said hand in hand many times now in this video, but it goes hand in hand with this, right? Because it's like the same sort of thing. People that are incredibly skeptical because Fanatics and Topps know what they're doing. And it's just weird to me. And this sentiment, it's growing and it's getting a bit concerning, because when all this focus seems to be going towards, you know, the new customers coming in or trying to grow the hobby, and they're forgetting about us as customers. Some people will talk to those, you know, debut patches, which are fantastic. They are pretty cool, but that sort of stuff is not going to benefit the actual collector like you and I, right? That's going to be high-end stuff, high-end product. It's going to go to breaking and all that sort of thing. It's not going to be the, you know, the norm for most collectors. The other things that Topps and Fanatics have done have been like those frozen refractors, even though they said they'd get rid of serial numbered cards, they've increased more parallels and all that sort of thing. So they've also introduced more redemptions, which goes against all the things that collectors sort of want. And it's, again, with the focus of growing the hobby. Now, I know these businesses have to be forward thinking and all that sort of stuff, and I have nothing wrong with them wanting to innovate and disrupt, right? I'm all for that sort of stuff. I speak about that all the time on my channel. But it's more so the messaging when people push back and say, well, what's in it for us as collectors? We feel like we're not being acknowledged. That's the part that is a little bit concerning. And I'm really keen to sort of hear what you guys have to say down in the comments below, because again, this is a bit hypocritical of me to talk about it the way that I am, but I think you guys can understand where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that people shouldn't question things. I'm not saying that, you know, people should, you know, follow things blindly or anything like that. It's more so around the messaging of what this business is trying to do. I think everyone's opinion is valid. And when we consistently see, you know, news like this come out of Fanatics and Topps, and the people that are getting paid or the people that are sort of at the forefront of this hobby from a social media perspective are saying, you guys don't know what you're talking about, we're going to push the positive news to the people, that's like just disappointing to see, because it feels like the average collector, the people, again, I'll say this, that made the hobby relevant, are not getting heard, right? They're basically talking, Fanatics are listening, but they're not hearing us, if that makes sense. They're sort of saying, yeah, you guys can F off, because the customers we're going to bring in from a 10 times perspective are what we care about right now. Now, I know they've done some things, like I said, to improve things for people, but I don't feel like I'm saying that just yet. So again, I'm sort of keen to hear what you guys have to say. Now, one thing that was interesting that Ryan from Sports Card Radio also mentioned again, where he said, Dude Perfect debuted to over 1,000 viewers today. Never saw them break a sports card product. Sold weird mystery boxes that had things like AirPods within them. I'd honestly rather watch Paint Dry or a Sesame Street marathon but maybe G-rated content is enjoyable to some. Now, again, I think stuff like this is targeted to a very specific audience, and clearly maybe we're just old guys sitting on our lawn saying, this is stupid, get off my lawn. But it has to go hand in hand, right? There's so much focus on these new guys. I'm repeating myself now, but you get what I'm saying. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for Topps and Fanatics to come out and explicitly do something that benefits the traditional collector, the collectors that made this thing relevant. And some of you guys will say, with them streamlining, their store, bringing Fanatics live helps with that sort of thing. Sure, but that looks to be more like the future customer rather than the current one. Now, I'm repeating myself many times, but I'm really keen to hear what you guys have to say. Call me a hypocrite down below, because I think maybe technically I am, but I think the general point of my conversation has hopefully come across, and you guys can understand where I'm coming from. So thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.